What's going on, everyone? It's David. This is Smart Fitness, and today we're going to be talking about non-food related causes that lead to flare-ups in people with IBD, and in particular, people with Crohn's disease, based on my experience and what I've read online. So, there are four common causes that I've come across that people have problems with. So, the first one is stress. Next is lack of sleep. Another one is overexertion, and the fourth one that I find is kind of difficult for us to avoid is coming in contact with or using antibiotics. So, to get started, we're going to talk about stress. Now, stress is something that we can't really control, but psychological causes do tend to play a role on the gut. There is science comparing the brain gut axis. So essentially, if your brain is stressed, your stomach will feel it indirectly. The link between this is not entirely well known, but there is a causal relationship between flare ups and stress. So I can speak on myself. When I started a new job, if I don't exactly know what I'm doing, I tend to have a flare up for that entire first week just because I don't exactly know what to expect. There's not a whole lot I can do about it. My diet doesn't really change. I'm not really sleeping less. I'm not doing anything crazy at the gym, and typically my supplement stack more or less stays the same. So, based on that, the only thing that I can conclude from it is that stress, from an uncertainty perspective, is causing problems. So, what can you do to basically remedy this? There's a lot of talk shows on there that talk about how you can decrease stress, as well as obviously, if you do a quick Google search, you can come across it. But what I have found to help with me is doing simple things such as yoga, mindfulness meditation, just sitting down in a quiet space and having time to reflect, as well as have an inward focus. So rather than constantly allowing yourself to be stimulated by certain environments, allow yourself to actually see how you're doing from an inward perspective. As well, I found that going to the gym and actually doing light cardio tends to help. Typically, resistance training does not bode well when I'm having a flare up, so I'll try it, but usually it's a kind of a not going to happen situation. Next, what I would recommend to people is try classical music. Classical music does calm people down. There's research to suggest it. It's been well documented for over the last 50 years. I tried it myself, and sure enough, it does help. It doesn't exactly alleviate the symptoms of a flare, but it does take away from the stress aspect. So by indirectly removing that stressor, you can allow yourself to start to heal a little bit better or feel better over the long term. Next, what I want to talk about is a lack of sleep. Not having adequate sleep or not having a proper sleep can definitely lead to flare ups in people that have IBD. So, for myself, if I don't get an average of 8 to 9 hours of sleep, chances are I will wake up feeling kind of off with my stomach. It won't necessarily be a flare up that day or that like the following day, but if it's a continual pattern, I will have a flare up. So I know when we went to Europe last year, just the time change, it caused me to have an irregular sleep pattern and my sleep was not good. So even though I was sleeping about 7.5 to 8 hours, by the third day that we were there, I ended up having a flare up that lasted the course of the next 2 days. So my dieting, my food habits kind of went on hold, obviously, based on the fact that we were in Europe. But the moment that we had that time change crossover, or the fact that I was up for pretty much 24 hours due to the plane ride, I started to feel like crap. And then it just kind of progressed slowly, like a low grade pain type of buildup that just slowly kept increasing over time. So essentially, what I'm getting at is you need to take into consideration your sleep patterns. Everybody should be doing this, but especially people with IBD, because of the fact that this low grade, constantly attacking your body through not getting enough time to recover and to essentially allow your microbiota to function properly the way they should, you can cause problems. You can cause yourself to have a flare up. Now, the link between microbiota and sleep and just the general understanding of good versus bad bacteria is not entirely understood. So I'm not going to be going too in depth into that. But essentially, if you're not sleeping long enough and then you're feeding yourself with crappy foods or you're not feeding your microbiota that is healthy and good microbiota, you're going to lead to a flare up as well. So, in the same respect of your diet, sleep kind of functions the same way. You need to recognize that sleeping is necessary, just like having an adequate, clean, not junk food filled diet is necessary. Next, we're going to talk about overexertion. So this kind of sounds like an intuitive thing, but I don't know. I've preached this with the normal population that of people that I train, and they seem to get it. But from a Crohn's disease perspective or IBD perspective, it's something that you really have to be aware of. It's something that even I have to be aware of because of the simple fact that if you're increasing your activity levels, but you're not really compensating for it by having downtime to essentially recover, you can lead yourself to have a flare up. So overexertion doesn't necessarily mean going to the gym. It could mean working longer hours at your work job, or essentially just staying up longer, or hanging out with friends later, stuff like that. It's physically demanding, even though you're not doing something that might necessarily be physically demanding. So you need to be aware that if you're consistently increasing your level of exertion, chances are you could cause a flare up if you're not allowing yourself adequate time to recover from it. But being aware of how you're increasing your activity levels plays a huge role on your ability to manage your symptoms as well as keeping the disease in remission. If you're slowly increasing your level of activity over the course of several days, weeks, months, whatever it is, chances are your body will adapt to it just like it does to any other stimulus. But if you're going from completely sedentary, or somebody who stays at home all the time and goes to bed at 9 p.m., we'll say, and then they either go and start working out 5 days a week, or they start hanging out with their friends till 1 a.m., or something, or they start eating less healthy, like stuff like that. It's just that it's creating an atmosphere where you're going to feel sick, and chances are you're not going to be able to recover from it, at least not adequately for an extended period of time, regardless of the supplements, regardless of the medicine, and regardless of your sleep. Overexertion and sleep kind of go hand in hand. If you're sleeping long enough, but you're exerting yourself longer than your sleep duration, you could lead to a flare up. But chances are, if you're overexerting yourself, you're likely not going to have enough recovery time as it is, just because of the nature of how the westernized society functions. Maybe if you're in another aspect of the world where they kind of recognize that rest is necessary, you could be okay. Now, the next thing we're going to talk about is something that's a little bit beyond most people's control, unless they're able to essentially eat food from all organic sources, or food where they know exactly where it's coming from. And that is the use of antibiotics, as well as other flare up causing agents such as smoking, alcohol, prescription medications when they're taken incorrectly, stuff like that. But the main focus of what I want to talk about is antibiotics. Now, before I get into that, obviously we know that for people with IBD, alcohol is not a good mixture. It causes problems, so myself, I choose not to drink at all. And obviously, from the general population perspective, smoking is bad. So I would not mix either of those two together with having Crohn's disease or any IBD or IBS symptoms in and of itself. We don't even have receptors for alcohol, so it kind of makes no sense for why you would put this toxin in your body in and of itself, beyond the fact that it makes people that are quote unquote awkward more social. So, or it brings about a fun time. But quite frankly, if you need alcohol to have fun, you need to readjust your life. So, moving into antibiotics, I basically just want to point out the fact that based on how everything is created in our society for food, the use of antibiotics and hormones are kind of almost inevitable. Unless you're eating food that you know for a fact does not have any antibiotics, does not have any hormones on it, has been farm raised, fed with like grains or grass, especially with animals, stuff like that, then you could be okay from a what you're putting in your mouth perspective. But at the same point in time, chances are you're going to have taken antibiotics at some point in time in your life. And taking antibiotics destroys your gut microbiota, as it is well documented in research. So that's why it's generally recommended, if you're taking antibiotics, that you would take some sort of probiotic, or have like a probiotic yogurt or kefir or something along those lines to basically restore that gut flora. Problem with that is it doesn't really stay in your body the entire time. Probiotics essentially come in, absorb some of your mucosal lining for food or prebiotics, and then kind of travel their way out. So you constantly have to have a regular stream of it. If you're taking antibiotics and they just destroy everything that's in there, regardless of it being from your chicken that you're eating or from a medically prescribed perspective, you're going to be destroying your gut microbiota, and that will lead to a flare up. So essentially, you need to recognize that taking antibiotics on a regular basis is not ideal. So that's just my point of view on it, guys. I think in summation, you can control your stress, you can control your sleeping, you control your overexertion. Antibiotics, something that's a little bit more difficult. Antibiotics, obviously, it's something that you kind of need to worry about, but you can't entirely take out of your body and your lifestyle. Sleep longer, reduce your stress, increase your level of activity slowly, and as always, ladies and gentlemen, stay strong.